And so now that we are aware that there are great things coming for those of us who trust Him and fully bow down to Him without any compromise with the world, that there's happy times coming for us somewhere over that rainbow. But before I even begin today, let me stress that what I'm about to lay out is a potential scenario of how we might see things play out. It's just that, potential or a possible way that these things might come into play here. Because I've always said, folks, remember, I'm not claiming to be a prophet of any kind. I'm just a lowly preacher who's studied things out in great detail over the years. I've done a lot of research, and from what I'm gathering in logical, truthful ways, from all I'm seeing on the true side, opposite the lie side, I see things come into play this way. That nonetheless, I believe that the Messiah is going to arrive here soon. And it's going to be an interesting arrival, coming with the clouds. I believe coming with the clouds, He's coming with all this truth, all these glorious things, because that is clouds, that's purity, pure truth, pure information, as opposed to when the pit was opened, it was black smoke, which is lies and filthy information, corrupt issues and false churches and false preachings. So the Messiah is coming with the clouds, and I believe we're going to see Him coming, yes, everywhere, for some interesting reasons that I have some thoughts on. But in general, remember that He can ascend and descend on His own. That's an interesting thought. Now, He was also here in a physical form of some kind, because He challenged Thomas to put his hand in his side, in his wounds. So He had to have some physical form. He ate a piece of broiled fish. He had some physical form. But keep in mind that that is His resurrected form. And as Paul wrote, corruptible shall put on incorruptible. So if He had wounds that actually caused His death, that were still on His body, but He wasn't dead, that means He's now immortal, completely impervious to death. Now, when the Bible says we shall be caught up in the air with Him, and you look up the word air, it means firmament. The Bible mentions 3 firmaments. The air around us, the atmosphere around us, is a firmament, the first firmament. Then there's the heavens above that. Then there's the outer heavens that we don't understand yet. That's where the Father dwells, apparently, the way it seems to be by the scholars that I trust. So, if He can ascend and descend when He wants to, He's invulnerable. He's now immortal. He has a physical form, but yet He can sort of ascend and descend. He could float. So if we are transformed in the twinkling of an eye, when the dead are raised, and we're all caught up with Him in the air, in the firmament, in our atmosphere, is it not possible that we're simply floating above everybody else, and we're now above anything they want to do to us? Would be like the angels, perhaps, in some form we're not used to. That's just one theory, but just play with that for a moment. If that's the case, the dead are raised and we are raised with them, with the Messiah in the air, in the firmament. We're floating. Remember, Messiah ascended and descended on His own. He can float. He didn't need an airplane. So let's imagine that if we are caught up with Him and we are translated as He was, we will be able to float too. So we're caught up with Him in the air, in the firmament, the atmosphere. Now, also remember, another evidence for the fact that we're going to stay here is Noah never left. He had to stay on earth to see the punishment for sin. Lot was not whisked away to the heavens. He was taken to the next mountain, where the next day he was able to see the smoke of their burning. He saw the punishment for sin. The remnant always has to be somewhere nearby so they could see the punishment for sin. It's almost like when you have several brothers and sisters, one gets out of line, the father spanks the disobedient one in front of the others. It's a deterrent, because it will put away evil from among you, in the way that the King James words it in the Old Testament. It becomes a deterrent. It stops people dead in their tracks from thinking about wanting to do something like that themselves. So we're not going to be whisked away in some rapture. We're going to still be here. I believe, though, just as the Bible says, we shall be hid in the day of Yahweh's great anger. The book of Zephaniah 2:3. And as this takes place, we're transformed, the dead are raised. It's going to scare the living daylights out of those who were lukewarm or the heathen, and they'll realize it's too late for them. And all literal hell is going to break loose on earth while we will be protected. We're going to be hid in that day. That's how the Father's going to hide, or shall we say protect us. We will have like some kind of a metaphysical force field around us where they won't be able to hurt us. They might be able to see us like angels, and they'll be scared to death because they'll know we have a different realm than they are. We're in a different dimension, perhaps. Now, this is just one way to see this. I mean, there's slightly different ways you can see it, but it does seem to indicate that we're going to be here to see this. It says hid in the day of Yahweh's great anger. It doesn't say we're going to be whisked away in a rapture, taken up in the air, in the firmament, in the atmosphere. Remember, Christ can ascend and descend. He can somewhat float under his own power. Gravity doesn't affect us for some reason. And of course, then your wounds don't affect you. It's going to be very interesting. But I would say this, that again, because we have to see the punishment for sin, we're going to be here. We're going to see it all. Perhaps that's when we then stand with Messiah when he says in Luke 19:27, "Those that would not that I should reign over them, bring hither and slay them before me." It might be our jobs, just as it was in the times of Moses at the foot of Mount Sinai, for Moses to send the Levites out, which would be those like ourselves who are studying this in depth, to go out and gather those who are instigating the golden calf rule system, the we the people rule system. It might be up to us to gather them, and they'll have great fear. And then we will also at that time, knowing that this is all happening, we're going to have tremendous fear of the God above us, because we'll know that he had the power to translate us and make everything change so dramatically. Yes, this God of the Bible's for real. And he might have this situation where we got to gather them up so that we can slay them in the presence of the Messiah. He has to show that there's punishment for sin, and we are going to have to witness it. But then, as it says, after this, he's going to dry our tears, and things will not come into mind again. Again, this is just one way to see it, but there's going to be a dramatic difference when this takes place. It's not going to be a rapture. You're not going to be raptured completely away, and you're not going to be rewarded for having not gotten involved in trying to advance the Father's kingdom. You're going to be punished along with the heathen and the lukewarm. And you can find evidence of that in Matthew 25, by the way. If you're not trying to advance the Father's kingdom, as is our commission, then it's going to be very clear. "Depart from me, ye who work iniquity," lawlessness. Remember, man's laws are lawlessness, iniquity. It's worthless. If it was in line with the Father's law, then the Father would be pleased with it. But it's not. That's why they call it a legal system, because it's in opposition to the Father's law system. And it's sad, but by now we've probably lost a lot of listeners on the archives that think that there's too much seriousness here. There's too much to be responsible to. There's too much work to be done. They'd rather just do as they were doing before, covering their ears and their eyes and going back to their televisions or their other forms of false reality, trying to avoid it, putting their heads back in the sand. Well, no, this is just too serious for me. It's just too much for me. I can't deal with it. God will just love me and forgive me. Well, they're in trouble, and they don't know it. But now we're at a point where you folks are starting to see there's a happy ending here. And we're starting to wake up that the law system that has been beating us up so bad and getting worse and worse on a lot of us. I mean, a lot of us have been persecuted. A lot of us have been afflicted. A lot of us are realizing there's a much better system out there. So I'd like to take us into the rest of the show with a song that we kind of, again, adjusted the words on. And some of you more seasoned folks will remember this one. But it's to show that, yes, Caesar's law is a mess. The Father's law is the answer. And we got happy times coming, folks, for those of us that can endure to the end. Listen close.
I thought justice only worked in fairy tales, or for someone else, but not for me. Oh, their law was out to get me. That's the way it seems. Disappointment hearted all my dreams. Then I learned y'all's ways. I'm a believer. standard thing. It seemed the more I learned, the less it was. Oh, what's the use in trying? The complacent sing. They pretend there's sunshine when it rains, but both his law and grace made me a believer, not a trace of doubt in my mind. Oh, with his law, I'm a believer. I gave up on Caesar, testified. The law was out to get me. Man-made law was mean. Corporate law had thwarted all my dreams. Today we see y'all's ways. So I'm a believer, not a trace of doubt in my mind. Yahweh's law. I'm a believer. Who would want Caesar in their right minds? Then I saw y'all's ways. Now I'm a believer, not a trace of doubt in my mind. Now I'm a believer, yeah, I'm a believer, yeah. I'm a believer. Said I'm a believer, yeah. I'm a believer.
I remember back as far as grade school, laws didn't seem fair to me in a lot of ways. Even in school, the rules they had. I remember when two kids were acting up in class, just clowning around. The teacher couldn't tell which ones they were in a quick glance, and the kids were taking advantage of that and acting up whenever she couldn't see what they were doing. And it frustrated the woman to the point where she said, okay, the whole class is going to stay after school. Well, we all had to stay after school. And you know, those that remember those days, you'd have to stay after school. You were there. There was no school buses in those days. You walked home, every one of us. And so you missed a lot of important things, perhaps, like getting home for something or what have you. And if you were a pretty good student like I was, it was very frustrating. You knew who the kids in class were that caused the trouble, yet what could you do about it? And they thought it was a big joke until the teacher said, okay, the whole class stays after school. Well, I thought that was unfair, and in a way it really was, but it was the teacher's only way of trying to establish who was the guilty party, hoping they would come forward. Well, those two kids didn't, and she didn't force the rest of us to become stool pigeons, but we had to stay after class. That was kind of interesting, thinking about it now. Of course, we didn't have law classes in school. We didn't have anything, even the basics in law in grade school, high school, anywhere. You don't get to any law classes until you can prove that you can spit on a Bible in a secret society at Yale or Harvard. So they don't teach law in any major way or even a minor way. They just keep saying, well, that's the rules when you're in school, and that's how the system works. So you can't really complain, especially when you're a kid. The parents usually stick up for the teachers and their rule system. But I was very frustrated at things like that. That being just one example of the things I was noticing growing up. What I didn't notice until many years later was that what that teacher did was somewhat biblical. And I do remember that that teacher was a biblical teacher. That teacher would occasionally get us to sing Christian songs in class, which today you can't do that, of course. But she would occasionally entertain us with Christian songs if we had extra spare time, and we would sing Christian songs. But in retrospect, the Father's doing the same thing to us now. Essentially what he's doing is trying to encourage us to use that great commission duty we were given to encourage one another to be good in class, to sit up straight, to listen, to study, to obey and respect the father, the teacher. If we were all encouraging one another in the class, we wouldn't have students who would be rebellious, that would get us into the dilemma like we're in right now, with a bunch of bullies taking over the world. But sadly, that's exactly what we have. We've got a whole classroom of children, immature Christians, who are afraid to evangelize. They're afraid to talk to one another about what the Bible really says. And they've been conditioned into that. They've had it pounded into them over and over again by the public schools, by the false churches, the false preachers on television. And to top it off, their self-esteem that has been built up by Satan as well is afraid to be broken down because their pride says, I don't want to feel unusual. I don't want to feel peculiar. But that's what the Father said we would be, a peculiar people. Where I'm heading with this is the difference between different law systems and how there's only one real good one that teaches us independent responsibility and corporate responsibility. And I don't mean corporate as in the modern day sense, as though it's an industry of some kind or a business. Corporate meaning altogether, a group, communal responsibility. Now, we just talked about how the Messiah is going to rescue us, that we will be hid in the day of Yahweh's great anger. And we're going to be translated while the wicked are going to have to suffer a lot more. Although we're going to be rescued at one point, not by a snatch-away rapture, but we will be protected as these times get worse at one point. In the meantime, we're suffering along with the rest of the class. So when people say I'm getting a little on the tough side, not only do I have to be a little tough, but I feel vindicated that I need to be a little tough because, see, I've been held after class, having not done anything lately against my father, and everyone else in class is still having a blast, carrying on, snickering, throwing spitballs in class, making the teacher angrier and angrier and angrier. So these people that are telling me that the law is dead, don't obey the teacher, things like that, I'm sure you could see all the pictures I could put together here, comparing a classroom of disorderly children with a disorderly nation right now that's calling itself Christian. But of course, that's a hypocritical statement at this point. They're not Christians. They're acting up in class. None of them want to mature. None of them want to grow up. And those of us who are trying to bring this together and make the class a little orderly, those of us that are trying to please the Father, the teacher, Yeshua, are suffering right along with all the ones who don't want to help. I have to be a little tough. I'm like one of the kids in class who wants to go home, who doesn't want to be held after class because of the other kids who won't grow up. You see, I have other loved ones that need to hear more important things, and I can't get out of this class to help them. I have more important things to do to save other souls, to save lives, to take care of people that have been afflicted, who've been wounded, who have been in trouble by the system. I can't help them because I've got too many people keeping me in class, holding me back. In the Old Testament, in quite a few places actually, several places, 3 or 4 places it was instructed of Israel to take care of the Levites. Why? Because the Levites studied the law and explained it to the people. The Levites were somewhat as the clerics for the priests. And the Levites worked day and night trying to maintain order in Israel under the Father, under the priests, according to Father's law. They were to be taken care of. Everybody in the communities were supposed to make sure the Levites were taken care of and that they were respected, because they kept the people in line with the Father, in good standing, so that nothing could happen to their nation. And they knew that. Today, the false preachers and the false churches, thanks to the Jesuits in Rome and a whole bunch of other people who don't want us following that Bible, have made sure that that image of a respected biblical education is no longer a respected education. And so people like myself have to stay after school and suffer with the rest of the kids who don't want to listen. The same could be applied to a family situation. If you kids don't clean up your room, you're not going outside to play tonight. 2 kids might be cleaning up the room out of 3 of them, and the third one doesn't want to. He doesn't want to clean up the mess he made. The other kids want to go out so bad that they eventually give in and clean up the third kid's mess themselves. The parent comes back, sees the room clean. He lets the kids go outside and play, all 3. But then the 2 kids who cleaned up the room have a resentment against the third who didn't help them. And deservedly so, correct? We're in a similar situation. There's a few of us, a rare few of us, that are trying to clean up our room, trying to clean up the mess, trying to maintain order in the classroom for the father and the teacher, while the rest of the kids are still running around like spoiled children, doing whatever they want. And they wonder why things keep getting worse. They're wondering why the teacher keeps getting angrier and angrier, and things keep getting worse and worse in our world. Until enough bodies start dropping, and perhaps even their own bodies start failing them, most people aren't going to listen. They've been that spoiled that their consciences have been failing them, as we heard in the previous study. Their consciences have been wiped clean. That's not just the Jesuits that are running the churches. That's not just the politicians. That attitude has been infecting everybody. It's an abandonment of the conscience and the heart of flesh that the Father gave us, to then instead bolster self, shine up the halo above your own self-esteem. Let the goody two-shoes kids clean up the room. Let the teacher's pets try to make things right for us. We have fun things to do. We want to keep watching television and all the evil things on TV, how they mock Christians. We want to continue to think that politicians can fix things. We want to continue to give our tithes and offerings to the churches that are lying to us and call the real preachers names. We want to fellowship with the 501c3 groups, enforcing the beast system upon one another so they won't have to be responsible to a holy God. They don't want to be seen as a goody two-shoes. They don't want to be seen as a spoil sport in their church and bring up anything that might discourage people from having fun with them. They'd just rather roll with the flow. So the multitudes keep heading down that road, that broad road to perdition. And the longer it takes these people to wake up, the more it wearies those of us who are trying to clean up the room without them. And I think the more the Father's getting angry because we're doing all the work. So as they keep running around sinning and supporting the beast system with their witness and their testimony, every time they give a social security number to somebody, that's a testimony for the beast system, don't forget. Every time they do something in their church, under the 501c3 church they're in, they're encouraging their neighbors to think that that's a wonderful church and it's something that they would recommend. They're witnessing for the beast system rather than the Savior. And one day, the Father is going to be a little bit too angry. And what we talked about just a moment ago is going to come down hard on us like a ton of bricks. Or maybe just on them. Maybe at that point, the Father might say, okay, it's time to get my dear children out of there, out of harm's way. And that could happen any day now. But sadly, and very sadly, it does. It brings me to tears quite often anymore. These people are so tuned out from reality that there is a Father in heaven that created this universe and this world that they are living in. They are so tuned out that they don't fear Him at all. They have absolutely no fear that He's coming around the corner of the hallway, just like a principal, toward the classroom with a paddle. They have no fear, just like the kids in that classroom that won't quiet down, thinking the teacher's not going to bring the principal. The teacher's not going to make us stay after class. Well, what if they were already staying after class and were still acting up? And the principal's on his way. They have no fear of His wrath. People today have no fear of Yahweh's wrath.
On a morning come of Yahweh's fury, the country that's turned from His side. Keep strolling with our crowd like weird glory, just ignoring our cries. He'll come out of the clouds on a white horse glowing with a two-edged sword, sense to say. Don't want to try begging the lost to hear Him, they'll just keep on in the ways, with no fear of His wrath. He'll give them no more time for questions. The final decree's been heard. Yet they follow their great beast under its direction, disregarding Father's word. Now neither man-made laws nor their corporate laws will offer safety from the one done for you. These times Lord says would take your life now like a bad dream come true, as you now fear His wrath. So when the morning comes, will you be with her? With a blessing without your own fatal song. You throw away your choice to stay with you and forever stay wrong. As the nagging strings of your heart remain, you've got a desert on that beast and her way. And still the saints beg you to leave her, but for now you're gonna stay, with no fear of His wrath.
So folks, it's very, very sad. They don't have any fear of His wrath. It's very tragic. It's very sad. It's a matter of how everyone out there runs to the preachers that will coddle them, that will rub their bellies and say, everything's fine. You're doing just fine, just the way you are. Just the way you are, 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 just the way you are. They come to me realizing I have a deeper truth than those preachers. And it's interesting at first, for a while, until they realize they need to contribute to this better society themselves, and their sins not helping that matter. And so some of you may have come to the conclusion by now, this preacher has all the right in the world to be upset with the people who won't come around. Especially those that he's talked to quite a few times, and they know better. They know what's going on. They know this, that, or the other. Yet they won't amend their lives in a faith and trust to the Father. So it therefore keeps the Father's mercies from coming back to this land. You would expect that this preacher would be resentful, being called names rather than supported for what he's doing. You would think that this preacher would be getting angry by this time. And at moments I sometimes want to, when I see certain things that are really very painful due to their lack of help in this situation. I'm talking about things like knowing that they're still murdering babies, thousands a day in this nation, and we can't stop it because nobody really wants to help stop it. Those types of moments, those and where I know I have other people that need me for more important things, and yet I'm talking to the same person sometimes for the 18th time, and they keep promising me, yeah, they're going to change someday. You would suspect that maybe deep down inside me I'm getting uncomfortable in a way that would want to stir up a little anger. But that's not the case. There's many opportunities for anger. The problem is they're just as sad and pathetic as the people who don't understand a single thing. Because the people that don't understand a single thing, who haven't heard a word of any of this yet, they at least are not hypocrites yet. Some of them are attending churches, knowing that that's all the light they have, doing their very best trying to respect and idolize the true God of creation. I feel sorry for the people who know a lot of the things that we've discovered in recent decades, and yet sit around knowing that they haven't made any adjustments to their lives to accommodate these things. Basically because they're too focused on feathering their nests or making sure their sins are intact in a quiet way. A lot of them don't know that they're adding up more and more wrath from the Father. Because these people have not been taught verses like Hebrews 10:26. For if we sin willfully after that we have received the knowledge of the truth, there remaineth no more sacrifice for sins. Those of you with us at this ministry have heard that passage from me quite often. And that includes a lot of the people that I'm talking about. But for some reason, they just can't let go of their worldly ways and begin to make amends to their lives. So no, I'm not angry with them. I'm very, very heartbroken about it. I feel sorry for them. I pray for them endlessly. And I cry about it almost every night. I drive myself crazy trying to find ways to reach these people. And they probably have no clue that I'm even thinking of them. As soon as I walk away from them, they probably feel like they're off the hook again, and they go back to whatever they were doing, hoping not to run into me again, hoping I won't call again or email again. Because I'd stirred up a part of the conscience in them that they had comfortably buried a long way back. And they don't want me opening that can of worms again. They were comfortable where they were at. They feel that it's an all-loving God and He's going to forgive them just the way they are.
Just the way they are. Just the way they are. Just the way they are. Just the way they are.
So when I know they have this type of an attitude, when I can sense it and feel it, I do my very best to make sure that arguments don't begin. I make sure I bow out before it gets bad. And I feel sorry for them. I pray for them. I ask some of my closer people if there's anything I might have done to hurt those people. I do everything I can to try and figure out how to reach them again. All in all, though, I've got to move on. I feel sorry for them, but I've got to move on. Those who might be listening, who might be one of those, either close to me or far off in the distance that I've never even met them, and they're just following on the archives or on their website or something to that nature. And you've learned a lot of these things that we're talking about here, either through us or through other ministries that are waking up. If we don't want to have to be slain on that day of Father's anger, fearing that we're going to have to watch loved ones being slain, then we'd better get out there and stand as faithful witnesses for the Father's governance, for the real King of Kings, not the beast system. We need to get rid of our ties to the beast system, come out from among them and be separate, and be a living sacrifice for our King of Kings. And if we have any remorse that we're the ones forcing other obedient children to be made to stay after school, then we had better start sitting up straight in class and thinking hard about listening to the ultimate teacher, our Father in heaven and His Son, who have the power to cast us into hell when this living hell is all over with. Folks, I can't forgive sin. I've mentioned this many times when I feel that these people don't understand. These people that are in these mega churches and in these feel-good churches, their pastors basically give them the impression that they can forgive their sin. When a serious believer brings up a passage to these people that clearly says that they're in sin on something and that the law still stands, they run back to their mega church or their feel-good church or their smiley face church, and they run to their pastor and say, that man hurt my feelings. He said the law is still there and that I'm in violation of la la la. The feel-good preacher then reassures them that the law is dead, reassures him that that law is not important, or he reassures him that you don't have to worry about it because this, that, or the other. Essentially what he's doing is allowing them to believe that he can forgive their sin. I can't do that. I can't forgive sin. Only the Father and the Son can do that. So when they come to me in my gathering, and I tell them that the law has to be upheld, and show them dozens and dozens of passages, out of the New Testament, mind you, where a lot of them, the Messiah himself said we have to keep the law, they'll still argue with me, throwing all kinds of twisted passages in my direction, trying to prove me wrong. Because their feel-good preacher has given them this information in a conditioning sense, so that they might have ammunition against those of us who understand the Father's true word. I can't forgive sin, and neither can these false preachers. I can't lie that I could forgive sin, but the false preachers don't mind lying. They don't mind giving false witness. They don't mind it at all, because they also like covetousness. They like to feel that they should have everything in the world. They want it all. They want the big fancy churches. They want the big fancy cars, the fancy houses, the beautiful tailored suits. So no, I don't resent the kids who won't help us clean up the room. I feel sorry for them. Because I know now I'm suffering along with them in this class. I'm not allowed to go home. I'm not allowed out of this persecuted mess I'm in. I am suffering worse than most of them because I can't drive under Caesar's laws. I can't do a lot of the things that they could do because they're still pinching incense unto Caesar. They're still pinching incense unto Caesar. I'm still being persecuted much worse than they are. Yet these so-called Christians would rather take half the Bible and throw it away and then twist the verses in the remaining half to make sure that they don't have to get right with a holy God. They have allowed their emotions and their imagination to rule over them that solidly. I feel sorry for them. Just like I'd feel sorry for the kid that didn't want to help clean up the room and things might not have went so well and the father might have come in and given that child a tough spanking. I don't resent them. I feel sorry for them. On the other hand, they resent us, and that's clear. You can tell that deep down they wish they could do what you're doing. But rather than respect you that you stepped out to be an example for them, you took the bigger risk of walking point. Rather than respect you, that you're much further ahead than they are, and in their hearts say, I need to catch up to that man. Rather than do that, they do like the bullies in the playground to the teacher's pets. And they got to ridicule, mock, and destroy the image of the teacher's pets so that they don't look as bad.
Just like Caesar's bullies did to Christ on the cross in his time.
And for that, again, I feel sorry for them because this life's temporary. I might look bad for a while as everybody mocks, ridicules me, and walks away without explanations, being unwilling to want to discuss whatever problems they might have with what they see with our ministry. Because no, we're not a mega church. We don't attract people by the 10,000s like the mega churches do. In fact, it's quite the opposite because we're serious about our Father in heaven. So no, I don't resent them. I feel sorry for them. I pray for them. But once I realize that there's no change in their hearts that's at least visible, I have to move on to others. And that's what I expect a lot of you to do as well. So I laid my heart out in this particular message to let you folks know you're not alone. If the world hates you, remember that it hated me first, the Messiah said. For if ye were of the world would love its own. But ye are not of the world, for I have chosen you out of it. That's why the world hates you. Why does the world hate that type of a person? It's a form of resentment. It's a form of jealousy. Because that person can't do what you're doing. They can't let go of their sin. They can't let go of the beast system. Can't stand for that same level of faith that you have for your Savior. Even though they understand it, they know they can't let go of the system because deep down they know they don't have enough trust to trust their Father, that He'll take care of them. But just as Job said, yea, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. Job had everything, and the Father allowed Satan to take every single thing but his life away from him. And Job still remained a faithful servant, didn't he? That's the example. And Job wasn't the Messiah. He was mortal just like we are. Every single one of us has the capacity to do what Job did. And yet, Many of us are living in the lap of luxury, afraid to give up our second car, afraid to give up a television set, afraid to downsize from a 15-room house, afraid to step out of the system for fear that the beast might shut them off from some benefits they might be getting, fearing that the Father won't take up the slack in the areas that they need. So, no, I'm not angry. My heart cries out for them. I feel sorry for them that they can't find in their hearts the faith and peace that I found in mine for my Savior. Are you fulfilling your Great Commission duty? Are you helping to share the Messiah's message of hope and rescue for all of us who would come to Him, trust in His name and His authority, His kingdom, His governance? Or are you still on the fence? If you're on the fence, I'm still crying for you. If you're angry with me because I've cried for you too much, then I distance myself and cry for you all the more. If my being able to stand with more faith than you makes you feel like you can't reach this goal, and it's only causing you to hate and resent people like myself all the more, then I shouldn't have lived this kind of a life to be that kind of an example then, should I? This is a thankless job, folks. I'm not going to lie to you. The closer you step into this as men, and even with ladies groups, you women, it's a thankless job when you're in an apostate situation that we're in like we are now. Mark Twain said, "In the beginning of a change, the patriot is a scarce man, and brave, and hated and scorned. When his cause succeeds, however, the timid join him, for then it costs nothing to be a patriot." Some of us have heard that quote in secular circles, talking about the Constitution, talking about the United States or America. I'm a patriot to my Father and His governance. How about you? I'm hated and scorned, as I've had on my website for years. America's most hated preacher. I'm hated and scorned by a lot of people. I'm very much respected by a great deal more who are learning with us and growing. But this message was for those who are still resentful, still angry, weeping and gnashing their teeth that they can't come out of that system and do what we're doing. As Sandra said a few weeks back, a few baby steps, a little bit at a time, if nothing else. Like the verse, the unfaithful servant. He could no longer be steward. So he went back and he said, "Well, how much do you owe my master?" He said, 100 measures of oil. He said, "Sit down and write 50. There's a lot of controversy over that verse. And I have a feeling that that means at least try. At least ask them to give it a half-hearted effort. It's possible with that half-hearted effort, they might eventually get enough of that taste of that they might want it all. If you don't start, you'll never finish. A lot of you are still on the fence, torn between Caesar and the Father. One is going to take care of you cradle to grave. The other one's going to take care of you cradle to grave and then through all eternity. Which God are you going to choose? Which God will make you whole? A lot of you are struggling with this wrestling match inside of you, knowing that being a part of Caesar's system is idolatry. Now knowing that we've been lied to all these years, and it's time to make a decision. Some of us, like myself, made a quick decision in one big move. Others might be trapped pretty well, might have a lot of hurdles to overcome, and might have to come out step by step. But the question is, which God, Caesar or the Father, is going to take care of you? Until next week, blessings to each and every one of you who love Him. Hallelujah.
Who will you cry to when it's too late? Your church will tell you things are just great. But you can't go on thinking nothing's wrong in your life. What God would look at sin so light. Which God will pick you up when you fall. Weak gods will hang it up when you call. And false gods can't pay attention to your dreams. Your idol will plug his ears when you scream. Go on thinking nothing's wrong. What a lie. There's one God can turn your fears to light. Which God will calm you down when you freak? Which God will come around when you break? You can't go on thinking nothing's wrong. What a lie. What God can make you whole tonight. You know you can't go on thinking nothing's wrong. Yahweh can make